We will be discussing the essay titled Not All Who Wander Are Lost. This was from part A of the 2023 UPSC mains paper. Our learning goals are as follows. It's been usually observed that philosophical essays are comparatively tougher for most people to write. It's harder to generate examples for them. So the learning goals we will have is that how you should approach a philosophical essay, how to generate examples and incorporate them. I will also be trying to use examples that you already encounter in UPSC syllabus to help you understand how to already use your already gathered knowledge and leverage it for the essays while making it unique to you. Now, the quote is actually from a J.R.R. Tolkien novel. I suppose everybody has heard of them, Lord of the Rings. This is the actual quote. If you know it, great. Otherwise, it doesn't matter in the actual essay. Now, the first thing I usually like to do in a philosophical essay is try to understand or explain that topic to myself in 2 to 3 lines. Explain it to yourself in any language that you feel comfortable with. It has to be a 2 to 3 line meaning. Can be Hindi, can be English, or any other language that you are most comfortable with. For example, you have chosen this essay. Now, if you see the wordings of the essay, the meaning is itself very easy. Wander, lost. सभी भटकने वाले गुम नहीं होते. You have to find the meaning of the word wander, which is already given bhatakna. That is moving around aimlessly. That's wandering. But the essay heading or the title is trying to say that just because somebody is moving around aimlessly doesn't mean they're lost. Okay. So let's say this is my meaning. This is how I explain the meaning to myself. Now comes how will I be able to generate examples from this. See, this is the philosophical essay. The easiest way to use it is the hypothesis method, the thesis method. We will be discussing it, but I will try to focus more on how to generate points and examples. So this was my essay meaning. Now think about it. I have to write an essay on this. An essay differentiates from an article because it has a more balanced point of view, which means that you have to show both things. That is, you have to show points which are, reinforcing this line and which are against this. How are you going to do it? Think about it. For example, like a means answer, any answer that you would have written. What you have gathered is just because I'm moving around aimlessly doesn't mean I'm lost. Right? So think, okay, let's skip the introduction for right now. What will be the first thing? First thing will be to explain this. Why? What is the meaning of moving around aimlessly? Second will be why you're moving around aimlessly. It can also include types. How, in what forms can you move around aimlessly? Then the next thing comes. This becomes your hypothesis. Then comes, for naturally, let's go. You have got the what, you got the why, you got the types. What will be it? Next will be why not. This is your antithesis. Okay, and then you will move on to synthesis where you join these points. Now we will be explaining how examples are to be used in each point. So my tip is that as soon as you've written this to yourself, write down anything and everything that comes to your mind. Something like this. Just write it down. Whatever starts coming to your mind, write these things down. So most of these things are taken from your UPSC essay. For example, Vasco da Gama, when he reached India, he had a goal, but he didn't know the exact path. Because we have, as we said, wandering can be mental, physical, or finding new horizons. This was physical wandering or finding new horizons, but it can be mental also, or even religious. Can you think of somebody who comes to mind? The first person who came to my mind was Buddha. Then there is Gandhi also. He wandered India before joining into politics in 1915. The meaning of the planet, word planet means wanderer. This is from your geography first few chapters. So most of these examples I've picked from my my UPSC syllabus, but some things you can also think of from your own background. For example, Steve Jobs in India, he wandered a lot. There were Beatles also, if you can remember them. J.K. Rowling famously, while she was writing Harry Potter, didn't have a name in mind. She was writing it, she was on pension or some kind of money scheme from the government and was still writing Harry Potter. She didn't know she will become that big a writer. The books will be that famous, but she was writing. I even thought of the song You Chala Chal Rahi from Swadesh. You can even incorporate the song. You can also use, if you are a student of sociology or anthropology or philosophy or even political science, you can also use people from those backgrounds. For example, Thoreau. Then there is Nietzsche's philosophy on nihilism. If you are a science nerd, then you must have heard of the Mars, the Voyager one, the only man-made object in the Kuiper belt right now, or even the Mars rover. Actually, even the dark side of the moon, things landing on the dark side of the moon, anything that you can think of, any social reformers, they will also be wandering for science. What they are reviving, they don't know, but they're wandering. Now, how will we be using this? So the first thing we did was we just put in the meaning according to me, as I said. Now how will you start writing it? The first and most important thing is always introduction, and the second most important is conclusion. Think about it. These are the 2 points where you have the maximum chances of impacting the examiner, and you should use them properly. Now, introduction, I would suggest, I find it easiest to just write a story from any history incident that I can think of. If it's a political essay, you can also start on things like preamble, etc. But here, let's see. These are my examples. Can you think of any of these stories? I'm usually partial to Christopher Columbus here, or Vasco da Gama. When he started to find India, he was basically wandering. He didn't know he will discover the Americas. So I can start an essay with saying that when Christopher Columbus set out for India in the 14th century, he set out on the premise that Earth is round and he will eventually circumvent it to reach India. That was his goal, but there was no path, there was no one before him. He still set out to explore. And then he discovered something great, as big as India, the Americas. Just because he didn't have a set path, just because he was wandering, doesn't mean he was lost. This becomes my introduction. Now when I've started this introduction, it's very easy from here to pick to the meaning we get here. For example, in the end of Christopher Columbus, I said just because he didn't have a set path, he didn't have a navigation on how to reach his goal, doesn't mean he was lost. He was just discovering new things. Okay, so from this you connect. After writing a half page of the story, you write 2 lines connecting your essay heading to the story, and then you write the next line. Thus, not all who wander are lost. This is your introduction. This takes half your page, which is usually what you have when you write in a UPSC sheet. From the next page, from the next para, you start with the meaning of wandering. What do you think wandering means? Here you can give a 1 to 2 line meaning, and then also include types of wandering while giving example. For example, I will mostly paraphrase this in the first 2 lines. Then say Buddha, for example, Buddha's wandering for knowledge and nirvana, or a kind of spiritual wandering. There can be wandering for physical actual wandering like used in Columbus, and there can be forced wandering also. So this will be your first page, second page. From this you can get down to why wander. Now these are some of the things that I said which you started writing. Why will you wander? Why will you move around aimlessly? Maybe because you don't have a goal actually, or maybe because you have a goal but you don't know the path for it. Maybe you're just discovering new things. Maybe it was an accident. Who knows? These are the things that you can think of. This constitutes 1.5 page. Now what I would like you to do is, you have taken all these examples, try and put them in pestles format. What this will help you do is it will help you structure your essay. We started with Christopher Columbus, we connected it to our essay topic, then we explained the topic and also types. From that, what you can do is that you can use these examples systematically. You have to fill the next 2.5 pages about why not all who wander are called lost. Try to pick one example from each of them. For example, this kind of essay, the easy ones would have been the political, social, and historical examples. The tough things here would be the economic or the environment examples. Here, think it like this: wandering, not lost, usually meant discovering. Can you think of new things in economics which are focused on challenging the unknown or knowing the unknown? These were some of the examples that I could think of. Same for environment. Things which move from one place to another without direction. Migration pattern of wildlife. Birds. Nobody knew for a long time that birds were actually following a set path. Just because we didn't know, they were still following it. One thing I could also think of was is the seed dispersal of some plants. The white cotton balls, they are dispersing their seeds. They have a set pattern, they have a set goal. Looks like they're just floating, but they have a purpose. Honeybee is another example. Okay, so from that point of view, you try to generate these examples, and now what to do is you incorporate them. Coming back to here, you have given an introduction, you have explained the meaning of wandering, you have even explained why we are wandering, and incorporated types of wandering here. This should take you 2 to 3 pages. Here you have to start writing in the pestle also. For example, use the pestle with this. You started with meaning of wandering is aimlessness, but that doesn't mean they are lost because they are trying to find new path or new horizons or anything. From the life of Gandhi, let's say we use the Gandhi example here. When Gandhi decided to roam around all of India upon his arrival in 1915, it looked like to everybody that he was just wandering. But he had a goal in mind. He wanted to understand the people of India, their needs, their hopes, their aspirations. To an outsider, it might have looked like aimlessness, but to the Mahatma, this was a much needed journey. Now, important thing with examples is not that you should have many. The important thing is you should be able to connect them. I've used Gandhi in the first paragraph. I consider it my political or social example. I will again look at my list and try to think of another example that I could connect with it. The thing that I could connect with in my mind is pilgrimage, tourism, migration of wildlife also, Silk Road also. So let's say from Gandhi. But these journeys are not just to discover the people of the country. These journeys can also be about self-discovery or about discovering new countries. For example, Marco Polo or Ibn Battuta, whichever one you're familiar with, were great travelers of the 12th and the 13th century who used the Silk Road and found and connected the countries from Europe to India. They set out in a path unknowns and brought two cultures together. Same for anything that you can find from technology, science, etc. So what you will do is you will connect these. For example, I've used the Silk Road example, I've used the Ibn Battuta example, I've used the Gandhi example. Let's try to use that environment example. But this wandering without a path is not just inherent in human nature, it is inherent in the nature itself. For a long time, humans used to think that birds didn't follow a set path. Now we know that their migration paths are set. That's why we have things like the Central Asian Highway, Migration Highway, which protects these paths, allowing them to prosper. As you can see, I connected a current affairs topic with the basic concept of nature, allowing me to fill up a page also. Finding new horizons is just not about finding self or finding connecting new civilizations. Technology can also be a means of wandering. When Thomas Alva Edison was trying to build a bulb, he didn't have an exact path. He failed 100 times. He knew his goal, he didn't know his path. He was not lost. He might be wandering, but his goal was clear. So like this, you try to connect them within the examples. Again, I would like to point out here that it is more important that you are able to connect your example to your essay and explain it briefly on why you think it can connect. You also need to connect it with the previous paragraph rather than just give an example. For example, if I had just said Gandhi also wandered around India in 1915. Ibn Battuta wandered from Morocco to Central Asia to India and China in the 13th century. This doesn't connect. How did then at the third thing, as I said, the birds, the path of the bird and the Central Asian highway. You have to connect these three things. The best way to connect it is keep in mind what you are trying to say. For example, let's say the Gandhi example, I would start with one of the best and most impactful example of wandering recent Indian memory is that of Gandhi in 1915 after he arrived in India. He didn't have a path. He wandered the whole of India looking at different people, meeting different people, understanding their needs, their aspirations. And thus he was able to leverage it into the biggest mass movement of this country during the National Freedom Movement. This is my first paragraph. Now the second paragraph I have chosen Ibn Battuta. But these paths, these these wanderings without a goal or with a goal are not just about discovering the people of a country. It can also have a lot of historical and economic significance. For example, when Ibn Battuta set out from Morocco in the 13th century, he didn't know and that his words will be still being repeated in the 21st century. He connected such vast civilizations as the Moroccan, the Central Asian, Indian. Together, he was able to meet amazing people and new discoveries and introduce them to his home country. Let's go to the third one now. The third paragraph. It is not just people who wander. Till a couple of years ago, till the last century, science and people used to think birds also wander every couple of months. They didn't. They were migrating. They had set paths. These paths could take them thousands of miles away, but they still had a path. This is why we now have a Central Asian migration highway to protect these paths. Because nature also has these wanderings. These wanderings are also familiar to religion. So this is how you connect it to again Buddha or some other spiritual journey that you can think of. For example, Raja Ram Mohan Roy or Jyotibai Phule. Anybody who discovered a new thing. You will now be using the same examples for antithesis. What are the problems with wandering? It cannot be that all is rosy. You have to think when you have already thought of why wandering. Now you have to think of why not wandering. Can you think of something? Let's say low goal. I have hopelessness. I don't think life has any meaning. Discovering, experimenting doesn't always lead to what you are hoping for. Isn't always successful. You don't know the path. You know the final destination or just a path. Means it can be difficult. What about the people left behind? Things like that. So for example, for here, the things that I could think of are these. Wandering is also escapism. I'm escaping the drudgeries of life or the tragedies of my life. I have given up. There is also forced displacement. If there is pilgrimage and travelers, there are also refugees. For people familiar with philosophy, there is also nihilism. A life without purpose. They believe that life has no purpose. So that can also count as wandering. Again, we will go back to the same framework. What you can do is, whatever you had written for the prose of wandering, try to think of an example against it. For example, blockchain. It led to the e-rupee concept right now, or the UPI concept even, but it also led to bitcoins, which can lead to money laundering and other things, other black market things. That's the opposite. Same for, as we said, if there is tourists, then there is refugees. In it could be that scientific discoveries which were never fully made, people spent their whole life and couldn't find them. So those can be your examples. Try to put in 1 to 2 pages on this. As we have just pointed out these, you can use these examples. You can these points and put an example as per this. Then comes the hard part. Now you have to connect these 2 points into a synthesis. This was your hypothesis. This was your antithesis. Now synthesis. Synthesis is the middle path. Yes, not all who wander are not lost, but some are. Thus, when you wander, you need some guidance. You need some rules. Could be ethical rules, could be moral rules, could be societal rules. For example, Buddha wandered. He left his family, but he came back. He was also their path to salvation. Blockchain was very good. UPI was very good for the country. Bitcoins were bad, but now banks are making their own blockchain and using it for e-rupee, etc. Synthesis. I would just try to find synthesis between these 2 things from the examples that you've already used, allowing you to find it easier. For example, we used already Buddha. We used Gandhi. You can use Steve Jobs. You can also use Columbus. One example that I forgot to give were the Pandavas in forest. They were wandering around aimlessly after they were thrown out of their kingdom. So you can use that also if you can remember Mahabharata. Now the conclusion. The conclusion will be a 1 to 1.5 page thing, which will include all your points above. And the important thing in conclusion is that you need to try to conclude with an impact. That is the same as you started with the story. If you can think of an ending like that or a quote. Here are some of the examples that I can give you. In the migration also you could have used that. For example, I can conclude this. Not all who wander are lost, as poignantly put by Robert Frost in his poem The Road Not Taken. I took the road less travelled, and that made all the difference. There are some other quotes that I've incorporated. Most of these are commonly known, but you can also use them in other essays also. For example, when we're discussing the migration of animals, we can also, or the refugees, we can also use it for migration for humans by Yuval Harari. The current human civilization and the triumph of Homo sapiens is because of the migration of humans from Africa to the whole of Earth. This is something discussed by Yuval Noah Harari in this book. You can use this as a conclusion, in the introduction, even in the middle. Thoreau talks about this is Thoreau, by the way, that walking in a forest or walking in nature and losing yourself is the only way to understand yourself. Very apt here. Eat, Pray, Love, and Alchemist are very famous books, again about wandering and understanding yourself. So these are some of the examples that you can use. See, the most important thing to remember in an essay, philosophical essay, is not to be afraid of it. As soon as you have understood the meaning of the essay, you have everything. The only thing required is you have to think systematically. For example, as soon as you had this, the other things were very simple to get. I have explained it to myself. Not all who wander are lost. Okay, that means people, just because they are moving around aimlessly, doesn't mean they are lost. So the question becomes meaning. Done. Why are they doing it? Done. How are they doing it? Or types, as I've written. What are the side effects of it? Can we temper it down, the side effects down? Can we give some kind of synthesis? The next point, and then conclusion. Conclusion will be a mix of the synthesis and the introduction. And here, this is it. philosophical essays are actually easier to write down if you can break them down. So first focus on the brain dump of 2 to 3 line meaning, and this I call this my brain dump of all the examples that you can think of. Then organize them in pastel. There will be a pastel for which is again with your point, the pros and the cons. Maybe a pastel of synthesis if you can think of, and that's it. So this will be half a page of intro, 3 pages roughly of this, then 2 pages, 2 and 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This obviously will change, but just giving a bit of an example. 2 pages. That's it. So thank you guys for listening. I hope you find it useful.